Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the AfricaMusicLaw.com show. I am your host, Miss Uduak, and I'm super excited about this particular episode. Today, we're talking to a very special guest. But before we get started, of course, I have to welcome everyone that is joining us for the first time. If this is your first time joining us, we have been around in terms of the brand since 2014 for podcast show. And we now have the live stream, which started last year, and you all are enjoying the live stream. So thank you for joining us with that. If you'd like to catch our podcast episodes, we're available on all major streaming podcast platforms. So be sure to check that out. I can't talk this morning, excuse me. And what we do here, most importantly, is we're about empowering the African artists and the creative industry at large, not just on the continent of Africa, but literally globally, wherever they may be found. Our job is to enlighten, inform, entertain, and bring quality, amazing guests to the show who really add a lot of value, which is why I'm super excited about our guest today. Our guest today is David Bianchi, an actor, a poet, overall filmmaker, and so much more in depth and layers to him. I don't want to spoil it all. We're getting too much into it because we're going to really unpack all aspects of what he brings to the table today. So let me officially invite him to join us. David Bianchi, please welcome to the show. How are you? Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And I'm so happy that you're joining us on camera and that we're officially having you show your very handsome face to our audience. So we have so much to talk about: your project, the Minstrel Show, so many other things, artwork you've done, and then most importantly, or equally just as important, NFTs and getting into the discussion on blockchain, cryptocurrency, minting NFTs, etc. So the place I want to first start, though, so our audience really gets to know you, is your personal background, who you are, where you were born, and just sort of segue into that. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, starting with your background in terms of where you were born and
Sure.
based.
Sure. Hi, guys. My name is David Bianchi. I'm an actor, independent filmmaker, but also widely known as a spoken word poet. I am Afro-Brazilian and Italian. I was raised in upstate New York, born in upstate New York, but dual citizenship. I hold both Brazilian passports and an American passport. And, I basically I started getting involved in theater when I was a very young child, but didn't really take it professionally until I was probably in my mid-20s, at which point I graduated from Arizona State University. I was magna cum laude from Arizona State, top of my class there.
Excuse me.
Thanks. Moved to Los Angeles in, I guess, about 2004. And since then, I've been producing basically an art form that I now coined called Spinema, spinning cinema through spoken word. And it's an art form that I started creating in about 2004, 2005, basically producing short films, experimental narratives told entirely in spoken word poetry that all have socially conscious themes. And so flash forward to where we are now, it's now a genre that I've created in the art space. I've trademarked the name Spinema, and I'm widely known as the sort of the forger of this art, not just in the common spaces, but also now, as you said earlier, in the blockchain. So, I mean, that's a really short version of who I am, and I'm just really happy to be here.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit more. Did you always know that you wanted to go into just the creative industry as a whole, art and filmmaking, etc.? How did you come to that discovery? What was that epiphany that made you realize this is what I really want to do?
Sure. I guess my first recollection of being an actor was probably in about second grade. We would sit on the swing set and we would sort of act out TV commercials for each other. We would swap, somebody would act it out, so it would be on the swings and then go back and forth. So I was involved in improvisation before I even knew what improvisation was. And so when I was first on stage in third grade, in my first leading role, I played Captain Hook in Peter Pan in Mexico City. I lived in Mexico City for 5 years. And when I was there, I probably attribute and owe a lot to whoever that teacher was back in the 80s who cast me as Peter Pan, who was widely known as a white character. So in the 80s, this teacher, you know, despite whatever stereotypes were going on at the time, saw charisma and charm in this small little skinny brown boy and said, I want this to be our Captain Hook. And that was my first time playing a leading role in front of a room of 100 people. And I got the bug. You know, so I think I might even attribute a lot to those formative years of really sort of discovering the knack of what it means. You know, I think that everybody has what I call a molecular level gift, which is, I think that everybody who sort of births something into the world that is positive, that is strong, you have the genetic predisposition to be able to bring that into the world. So to give you an example, if you look at like someone like LeBron James, he's genetically predisposed to be one of the most legendary basketball players to ever live, but he still had to put in the 10,000 hours to be able to master that craft, despite his genetic predisposition. So I think that I have the molecular level gift to be a performer, to be an orator, to be a writer, to be an actor, to do all the things that I do today. But it's taken me, you know, countless hours of self-discovery and refining and what I call forging your knives, per se, to get you to that place. And so if there was a time when I really decided that this is what I wanted to do, it was probably my mid-20s. I was working in the nightlife business. And you know, I had a complicated childhood. I was a bit of a troublemaker. I was getting into a lot of shit, and at one point, you know, stuff got really dark, and I just decided, look, I got to make a change in my life, and if I don't make a change now, I may never get out of what I was doing. You know, which involved like nightlife industry. It was a lot of some criminal behaviors. There was a lot going on. So, you know, as a result of that, I had this sort of catalyst for change, because I got to a point where I was feeling desperate, right? And I often talk about GOD, the acronym GOD, the gift of desperation. I think that when people get the gift of desperation, they're willing to look in different directions to figure out what they're going to do with themselves. Think about a relationship. You don't leave a relationship until you get the gift of desperation. So you're finally like, I can't do this anymore. I'm broken. I'm desperate. I need to make a shift. And so that was my mid-20s. And that's when I said, you know what, I want to do this. What have I always loved to do? I've always loved to be an actor. So at about age 23, I said, well, I don't want to just go to LA and be a pretty boy with a headshot. I want to understand the mechanics of performance. So I made a choice to apply to community college. I graduated with a 4.0 for my first 2 semesters, because Arizona State was willing to accept me, but on academic probation, because I had withdrawn from university. So my GPA was like 0.07.
Wow. So, wow. I was wondering, because you are from the East Coast, and I kept wondering the decision to even relocate to Arizona to go to school.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when I made the decision that I wanted to be an actor, I made the decision that I wanted to work in TV and film. And I knew that New York City is a stage city. Chicago is a stage city. If you want to be in film and TV, you got to live in LA. Yeah. Right. And so I knew that I wanted to bridge the gap. And so moving to Phoenix was a 45-minute flight to LA, and I could slowly start, looking down the horizon to where I was going to be. But going to theater school for me was one of the most important things for my craft as an artist, because I was able to learn movement, voice, and diction. I really learned the mechanics of performance as it relates to theater, but I also learned theater history. And I was also able to take a lot of higher level classes that are not offered in the American school system, like African American history, African American studies, learning about, iconic figures in African American history, like Sojourner Truth, for example. You don't learn this stuff in high school. They just don't teach it. They might talk about the Underground Railroad, but you're not going to get granular. It just doesn't happen. Sure. So I'm beyond grateful for that. So, I came to LA with a degree, graduated with distinction, thinking LA was waiting for me, and it wasn't.
Surprise!
Yeah.
We all find that out.
Yeah. So I remember I was living on couches, and I had an air mattress in my first room for rent in Silver Lake. I had an air mattress, and there were cockroaches in the kitchen, and
Oh God.
I couldn't afford anything, and I had I used to put on 3 shirts and 2 pairs of pants because it was February. It got down to like 40 degrees at night, and I would bunch up my clothes in a ball and make a pillow, and I slept like this, on an air mattress. And
look at you now, right?
Yeah, and now I'm a member of the Television Academy and the Producers Guild, and I have a production company, and but my motto is this: whatever.
Actually, before you share your model, hold on.
Sure,
I still want to go back to what you said about self-discovery, and then the fact that you have an Afro-Brazilian background to you is interesting. How much of that informed your upbringing, particularly on the Afro-Brazilian side of things, in terms of how you were raised and that self-discovery piece you're talking about? Because there are lots of cultural issues, to get very granula, that affect even going into the industry when you have that kind of background.
Sure. Yeah, you're absolutely right. My mother is from Bahia, from Fortaleza. And so Fortaleza was the epicenter for the transatlantic slave trade. And I don't like to say slave trade, because what was brought from Africa weren't slaves. They were people that were enslaved. Right. And so I think that I always have to remind myself to frame it that way, because we oftentimes say, well, so many slaves were brought from no, they were people that were brought to the new world and enslaved.
Indeed.
So, many people don't realize that that 5 million Africans were brought to North America during the transatlantic slave trade, and 20 million were brought to South America. Most of them were brought into the point of Brazil, because Fortaleza, where Bahia is the furthest eastmost point to connect the furthest westmost point of Africa, which was the Ivory Coast and Nigeria, etc. And so I was able to, going to Brazil and going to Bahia and seeing and understanding and learning those roots, really made a big impression on me. But I didn't discover that stuff until I was in my teens. Because living in upstate New York, my father was a business person, and so I lived in a sort of upper class neighborhood there. And then I moved to Mexico City for 5 years, and in Mexico City there isn't really discussion. There aren't a lot of Afro folks in Mexico City. It's mostly Latinos and indigenous Latinos, and that's where I learned to speak Spanish. And so I didn't really come into contact with the notion of my Afro roots until I was well into my teens. But when I discovered that stuff, it really, really made me understand so much of the culture shock that I experienced in America. Because coming from Mexico City and Brazil and these places where I had been, mostly Mexico City during my formative years, a lot of the racist things that we experienced in America just didn't exist. Like, I'll call it like it is. Words like spick, wetback, nigger, all these words didn't exist in Mexico. They just didn't exist.
Sure.
But suddenly I came back to the United States when I was 15, and all these things were making sense to me. And then I realized what I was called when I was in 2nd grade before I moved. I realized what I was called by my principals. My principal, I have a very vivid story that I recount, that my principal in 2nd grade in upstate New York took my referral, which is the carbon copy, because I was a little insubordinate. And he said, "You see this here, son? This here right here? I'm going to put this here in my nigger box. I don't want you coming back here because I don't want my nigger box getting full."
Wow.
And that's what my school principal said to me. I remember it vividly.
Wow.
And so when I came back to upstate New York from Mexico City, and when I was 15 years old, I heard those words, and then people told me what they meant, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And that's when I really, really started to figure out, how do I fit in this world? Who am I? Am I Black enough? Am I Latino enough? And what am I? And so it really was a big culture shock for me. So as a result of that, I didn't trust anyone. I got into a lot of fights. I was bullied a lot, and then I started bullying a lot of people. And real talk, but as a result of that, I ended up getting expelled from 6 high schools.
Wow.
I never graduated.
No joke.
I never graduated from high school.
Wow.
And so I ended up getting a GED, right? So to come from that and then to graduate, as I said earlier, with distinction from Arizona State was a big deal for me. And, and a lot of these cultural confusions play into the work that I create today.
It's so funny. I can relate to a lot of what you were saying, and I'm sure a lot of folks with that immigrant background and experience. So even though I was born in the U.S., I was raised in Lagos, Nigeria, and I remember when my family relocated back to the States, for the first time being called a Black girl. I can't tell you how shocked I was. I kept looking around for the Black girl that they were referring to. I said, how can someone possibly be Black? That doesn't even make any sense. So I kept looking around until I realized it was me they were calling a Black girl. It was so shocking to me that you could just call someone Black. And of course, started to learn the meaning of a lot of things, among other things. So I always say for us that have this dual backgrounds, that we basically occupy the corridors of culture. And it's always trying to straddle that and figure out where we belong or not belong. And for me, a long time ago, I made the decision that I want to just occupy that corridor. I'm not interested in being either here or there. So even when I define myself, if I try to combine both cultures, I say I'm Nigerican, which captures my Nigerian heritage as much as it does my American heritage as well. So I totally resonate with what you're talking about. And the final piece on you getting into fights, that was me when I was living in Nigeria, constantly getting into fights, fighting all the time. And I never fought girls, only boys. But when I was relocating here, I said, clean up your act and just take that into the courtroom and fight over there, get paid for it. So that's so interesting with you being expelled out of 6 schools. So how do you make that transition then from being expelled to really, really graduating, magna cum laude, you said, from Arizona State? How does that happen? What mind shift? What happened in your mind?
Sure, and that's where I mentioned earlier. I really know that I got the gift of desperation, because I was in a deep downward spiral. At one point I was living in the streets. I was involved in a lot of black marketplaces, put it that way. And I had been in and out of jails a couple of times, and I'm very transparent about this story.
No judgment. I used to do criminal defense work. You're not the first. You're good.
But basically, I discovered, my spirit discovered that if I kept going down the path that I was going, I was either going to end up permanently incarcerated or dead. That was it. I remember a superintendent from my school, told my folks, as if your son doesn't stop, he's going to end up dead or in prison. And that was my reality. So knowing that was my reality, I really, really got like some real spiritual. I really believe it was a divine intervention. It was a shock therapy that was divinely integrated into me, that said, David, you're alive, and David, I've kept you alive. And David, I have given you these gifts for a reason. It's time. And so when I got that what I feel is a divine intervention, when God gave me the message and gave me the spiritual mechanism to understand how to spare myself, that's when I said, okay, good. I have to slam every door that is open, that could bring me back to some sort of place of dark destitution, criminality, whatever it is. And so I packed up and I left New York. I didn't even tell anybody I was leaving, because if you tell anybody you're leaving, they're going to make you
they're going to try to talk you out of it.
They're going to make you want to stay.
Yeah.
So I literally, I was just like, I was as quiet as possible. I'm like, I'm leaving here. I'm going to go to Arizona State. Remember, I printed out a black and white printout of the theater, of the Galvin stage at Arizona State University, which is the biggest theater that they have there. And I pinned it to this cubicle, because I was a telemarketer at the time. I was like selling data products or something like that, just something to sort of get by. And I looked at that every day, and I would say, I would look at that thing every day, and I said, I'm becoming an actor. I'm going to play on that stage. I'm going to play on that stage. Even though I had a 0.02 GPA, Arizona State would not let me in. I just knew I wanted to go to Arizona so I can get the hell out of New York. And figure it out from there.
Funny. 0.02?
Yeah, because
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, well, because I had enrolled in university, but I was so deep in the nightclub game that I just didn't go, and I didn't have the consciousness to withdraw. So I failed out of everything because I never showed up. So so through that hustle, I said, look, I'm going to play on the stage. I'm going to play on the stage. And it was sort of a manifestation because I knew I had the divine connection. I was like, I have to do this. And so, I ended up, Arizona State says, look, you need to go to community college. You need to take 6 classes and you need to get at least a B+ in all these classes, and we'll let you in on academic probation. And that's what I did. And I was a telemarketer all the way through college, and I worked 30 hours a week, and I took 18 credit hours. So 18 credit hours a semester, I worked 30 hours a week, and I managed to play on stage, and I graduated top of my class.
Wow. So, what a story. What a story. And that is a great backdrop for what's ahead, because that resilience, that learning, that introspectiveness, that full consciousness of self seems like it's guided you, because your work is just like direct, in your face, yet compassionate, yet really, really showing a lot of empathy, among so many other things. And we'll unpack it. But let's get into the step by step. I'm thinking about some of our viewers and listeners who listen to the story and may be in the same situation and are trying to understand the first step. So first step, you cleaned that up, got into college, graduated. Now you move to LA, and it's like you're starting this thing all over again. What keeps you from falling into the previous life you had in New York?
I love how you said you started all over again, because that's what it is. Because you think you accomplished so much, right? Because I was a big fish in a small pond, and then I come to LA and no one gives a fuck about your theater degree. No one cares about what you've been through.
Because they've all been through the same thing. So it's sort of like get in line and figure it out.
Exactly. And I often say this. I say, look, if you decide that you want to do something in your life, whatever it is, if you want to build an addition on your home, if you decide that you want to find that love, intimate partner and get married, if you want to start a business, whatever it is that you set your intentions toward, I invite you to attack the island and burn the boat. You understand that? Attack the island and burn the boat.
Go full court press, as I always say.
There's nothing behind you. There's nothing behind you that's going to serve you, because you have a past full of resentments and a future full of insecurities. So it's important that you stay right here in this present moment, so you could be aware of your surroundings, but knowing that you have to stay moving forward. That's the only way that you're going to achieve anything that you want to do. And put blinders on, right? Blinders. Why they put blinders on horses? They put blinders on horses so that they can't see the peripheral, because horses, they get very skittish if something happens in their peripheral. So we have to put, that's what they say, you have to put blinders on so that you don't get distracted by the peripheral, right? So you know what's in front of you. You know where you need to go. And it doesn't matter what the obstacles are. The obstacles are part of the process.
Absolutely.
Right? If you don't enjoy the process, then get out of the fight. But if the fight is what you're intended to do, then you have to fight forward. Right? Denzel Washington said, fall, but fall forward. You're going to fall forward, fall on your elbows, fall on your knees, fall on your face, but fall forward.
That's right. Crawl it out if you have to.
Crawl it out if you have to.
Absolutely.
And so what did that mean for me? I worked in the service industry for the better of 14 years in LA as a waiter.
Of course.
A bartender, doing whatever it is that I had to do to get me where I wanted to go. So, the thing is this. Everybody wants the red carpet, right? Everybody wants the red carpet, but nobody wants to be a waiter.
That's true.
Everybody wants to be an actor, but nobody wants to trudge the mud of Los Angeles for 2, 3, 4, 5 years doing menial side jobs to be able to survive, to step you into your purpose, to get you to the set, to get you to the TV show, to get you to the film, to get you to whatever it is that you're trying to do. That is what defines you. People come to LA all the time and they say, well, I want to be an actor. Okay, cool. Well, your first 2 years are going to define you, because that's when you're going to find out how bad do you want this thing. Because when you have no money, you have no contacts, you have no resources, and you're alone and your spirit is near broken, are you willing to continue fighting forward for what you believe your molecular level gift is asking you to do? Can you fulfill your destiny? Can you fight for your purpose? And that's really what the successful people and the unsuccessful people are made of. The successful people are courageous in that they feel fear, but they walk through it. The unsuccessful people feel fear and they cower to it.
Right. That's true. That's true. And maybe it's important for within the industry, folks probably already know this, but outside of the industry, those looking to get in, it's important to also underscore whether music, fashion, film, one of the reasons why your waiting tables, I've waited tables too, almost everyone in that space waits tables. Part of it is also even the way you're paid, the seasonal nature of your jobs, right? Even when you do a job, it takes forever for you to get that payment coming to you. So you have to supplement your income. And most of us in that space tend to, at least when you're building out your career, tend to wait tables, among other menial jobs you take.
Well, yeah, and I think you're right. But for actors and for models and for musicians, etc. So the reason why these artists are working in the service industry is because you need to make money from 5 p.m. to midnight.
That's right.
Because if you're an actor, the casting offices are open 9 to 5. If you're a musician, record labels are open 9 to 5. If you're a model, casting offices are open 9 to 5. So if you're working 9 to 5, you can't work on your purpose, right? Which is why the service industry works for people that are working in the entertainment acumen, right? So if that's where you want to be, that's what you have to do, and let's not get it twisted. The service industry is character building. It will give you a brick mouth full of humility one day at a time.
Preach.
It will remind you that you are not who you think you are. Do you know who I think I am? Oh, the service industry will remind you real quickly who you actually are not. Yes. and it will also teach you, real interpersonal connectivity. It will teach you how to connect and collaborate with people in high pressure environments. Like, absolutely. I'm grateful for the service industry. I really am.
Absolutely. So now you're in the service industry. We're walking this journey with you to get to where you are now. You're in the service industry. You're making, doing what you need to do to get to where you need to go. Now talk about getting into the film industry and just the creative industry, because poetry, you're known for your poetic work. I know you were so particular also about how you want to be described, not as a spoken poet, for example, or spoken word poet. You don't like that title, among others. I listened to an interview where you just spent some time really breaking down why. That was interesting. But just tell us, so transition from service, what are you doing now? What kind of jobs are you getting? How are you starting to potentially make a name for yourself?
Sure. So to begin, I'll say this. I have over 100 professional film and television credits. I am recurring on a show called Queen of the South, produced by USA and also on Netflix season 4, as well as major recurring on Tyler Perry's Ruthless on BET Networks, as well as recurring on a show called SEAL Team on CBS season 4. And I've been in, big studio films, all kinds of shows, and I've produced, I'm now in post on my 5th feature film as a film producer, and have been working heavily in the blockchain. So all of those things did not happen overnight, right? They are an amalgamation of struggle, trudging, but the knowing that my art is worth a lot of money. Even when I came here 17 plus years ago to LA, even then I would tell people my art is worth a lot of money. They just don't know it yet. They just
Where did that confidence come from? Because artists tend to undervalue their artwork. So you're the opposite.
No, I've always had a real knowing. I've always had a deep knowing inside of my spirit that I have what it takes to be able to evoke emotions from an audience, that I've always had what it takes to sway a performance. There was never a doubt in my mind about my ability. I don't know where that came from. I don't know what it is, but it's a confidence that I've always had. Now, not to say that I don't get insecure and I don't have I don't flounder sometimes in my own heart and my spirit, but I have to stay steadfast to my purpose, and my purpose calls for a certain kind of determination. So right now, working as an independent film producer as well as an actor, and also as a poet. And as you mentioned, I've been televised, nationally televised several times, performing, spoken word poetry, and have been producing Spinema films for the better of 16 years. And I like to use the phrase performance poetry because I think
that's the phrase I was looking for.
Right. And performance poetry, I think, is important because, just because you're a good writer doesn't make you a good performer, right? And just because you're a good performer doesn't make you a good writer.
Correct.
And not every poet, every spoken word poet, could really deliver a performance. Every word is spoken. So what makes this poet different from that poet, right? So when I think of what I do and what I think of some of the poets that I look up to do, I call them performance poets, because I think that it's a hybrid of the written word and a physical, moving, palpable performance. For me, a performance poet is someone that you could put on mute and you could still feel a catharsis. You could still feel empathy for what they're going through just through what they're releasing through their physical form, right? And not all poets do that. Some poets just get up and read off their phone, and they call that spoken word. And I'm like, out of here. I'm real finicky when it comes to art forms, especially as it relates to this art form. So that's where I come from. Now, I do say this: I love all poetry. Let me say this: I love all poets. I don't love all poetry, because I think that the art form of poetry is important for humanity. I think that we need arts so that we can stay balanced and stay connected and stay tethered and stay, a community of human beings. Even if we look back at some of the great civilizations, the first things that we remember are their architecture and their art. And oftentimes they're written words, their poetry, their stories, the campfire stories. We remember those things. And then we think about their politics. But art always comes first when we think about some of the great civilizations. So I take my art very, very seriously, because I believe that generations to come will look back at what I'm doing and what I've done.
Okay, so before we get to the blockchain space, which is where we're headed, can you tell us, at least for your poetry side as well as your filmmaking, that first big break that you had on both sides that's helped you, propel yourself to where you are?
Sure. How did I get in? So look, I got into acting. Like I got my SAG card, my membership to the Screen Actors Guild, in 2004. And I did that doing extra work. So, I came in from the ground up. Like, I didn't come into this business with any notion of nepotism. Like, I didn't know anybody for the most part. I think I knew like one or two people who were working in the film industry. And so, I did background and extra work for about 4 years, my first 4 years in LA, just to kind of make ends meet and just wanted to be, around a set. And I remember I booked my first studio film, a movie called Priest. It was a Screen Gems movie with Lily Collins and Paul Bettany and Carl Urban. And it was a big theatrical picture, 3D released. And oh my God, I got my break. That was like 2007. I thought I made it. I did not make it. I got my first speaking role in General Hospital in like 2005. I thought I made it. I hadn't made it, And even if you look at where I am now, like there's a lot of actors that wish they had my problems, because my problems are more quality problems than anything else.
Yeah.
But have I made it? I haven't made it. I still don't think I've made it. And a lot of people look at me and they're like, whoa, David's made it. Well, because it's like, the thing is, there is no destination. There is no there. Like you could even take, the Emmy winner, right? You got your trophy, you're doing your conversation, your thanks and all that and your praises. Even the Emmy winner, eventually, after the buzz of the award settles, that Emmy winner will say, okay, now what? I made it. I got the trophy.
Yeah.
Okay, now what? Because life goes on. Creativity goes on. So what is the next step of your journey? See, the journey is the destination. And that may sound very cliche, but it's true.
It is true.
We are where our feet step. That's where we are.
And delving in the past glory doesn't really take us anywhere, because each time we must come and meet ourselves again and push to that higher level. So there's no fulfillment in just saying, oh yeah, I got recognized for XYZ, because like you said, it's temporary. Now you've got to keep living, and you've got to challenge yourself more, else,
1,000%.
What's the point? What's the point of life?
1,000%. I am not the same man today that I was 24 hours ago. And I have to be ready to face the world in a way that the world presents itself. And I have to be always willing and ready to reinvent myself. And that's, one of the big reasons why the blockchain is so important to me, because it is a reinvention of my creativity. And I'm really, really excited and grateful for the things that have been happening in that space. But I'm also really, really excited with where Hollywood is right now. I mean, I'm getting the biggest, I'm getting the biggest opportunities I've ever gotten. And there's never been a bigger renaissance for actors in all of Hollywood history, with not just film, independent film, cable, networks, streaming platforms. It's the biggest renaissance we've ever seen. So it's a great time to be an actor, and a great time to be
thanks to the digital world, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is a good transition for blockchain, as you already started to talk about. We've heard, right now, NFTs are the buzzwords everywhere you turn, and there's so many discussions going on around that, with partly half the population, it appears, and I would say those in a no, half of those in a no population still confused on what it is, and those within that population still, figuring out more and more what it actually is and experimenting with it, etc. And this is where you come in. Let's start first with a just very fundamental level of the basics of what is exactly a blockchain. And then we can transition to talk about your journey in minting an NFT, and specifically the particular work I'm so interested in talking about, because it's so enlightening to me as well, the Minstrel Show that you've set up as well.
Sure. So the underlying technology is a thing called the blockchain. And the blockchain is basically, it's a system, a network of computers that answer and calculate complicated mathematical problems and solutions. I'm trying to put this out in a way that just is easy to understand.
Well,
So the blockchain is the underlying technology. Now, on this blockchain are all these other things that sort of sprout off of it, right? So you've got the Ethereum blockchain, and off the blockchain sprout all these other things. So think of Ethereum like the World Wide Web, right? So you've got the internet, but then you've got Etsy, and you've got eBay, and you've got Amazon, and you've got all these things that spring off of the internet. So the Ethereum blockchain operates very much like that. And then what springs off of the blockchain? You've got things like OpenSea, you've got Rarible, you've got all these platforms that create NFTs. So an NFT is a non-fungible token. So what does that mean? So a dollar bill is fungible. In other words, if I take $1 and then you give me $1 and everybody gets $1, we all throw it in a hat, and then we all take out another $1, it still equals $1. And so in that respect, it's fungible because they can all equal one another. A non-fungible token means that it cannot be replicated, duplicated, destroyed. So if something is non-fungible, it does not equal other things, right? And so what that does is when you mint it or create an NFT on the blockchain, it creates authenticity, but it also creates this notion of scarcity as it relates to crypto art. So I'll give you a better metaphor. There are Mona Lisa calendars all over the country. Some old lady in Pennsylvania has a calendar in her kitchen that has a picture of Mona Lisa on it. That picture of Mona Lisa is worth the paper that the calendar is printed on. Somewhere in the world, probably in the Louvre, is the original Mona Lisa. And that Mona Lisa, there's only one, has massive intrinsic value because it is the original, right? And it is scarce. And so think of an NFT in that way. People say, well, it's only a JPEG. Correct. It is only a JPEG, right? But when that JPEG is created into an NFT by the owner and creator of that intellectual property, there is now only one of that JPEG representation on the blockchain as a non-fungible token, which gives it intrinsic value. So intrinsic value is basically whatever someone is willing to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
That is what it is worth. So people will say, well, but what about the picture in the magazine? So take a Calvin Klein ad, for example. A photographer will take a picture of a model in a magazine. That's great. It's worth the page in the magazine. But if that artist, that photographer, chooses to mint that their creation on the blockchain, then it gains the value that someone is willing to pay for it, because it is an original creation by the owner and the creator of that photography.
Okay. And yeah, absolutely. But let me just have you break down that blockchain definition just a little bit more. I really liked how you sort of got into more of the definition of the NFT. I think it's pretty, well, I hope that my audience watching can understand, or listening can understand that, because I thought you broke it down really well. On the blockchain, just to dive in a little bit more, you hear often the analogy that it's more of a digital ledger, and allows for security more so than ever before, allows for the ability for others not to be able to hack into that digital ledger, so to speak. And in addition, it's decentralized, among other things. So why don't you sort of break down those key elements of what makes up that blockchain?
Sure. So the blockchain is basically, it's a decentralized system of computers, all right, that all work independently, so that there is no centralized organization that controls or makes decisions for the blockchain. And so when you create something on the blockchain, like a non-fungible token, it is then sent through the blockchain and it is authenticated by the decentralized system of computers that are all over the world, right? And there's these people called miners, these organizations called miners, and those miners, they solve mathematical problems, and then what they get as a result of solving those problems are tokens. They mine Bitcoin or they mine Ethereum. So they help solve the mathematical solutions, mathematical problems on the blockchain, and their reward is an ICO, or an initial coin offering. So what is a coin or a cryptocurrency? So Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, Ethereum is a cryptocurrency, XRP, Cardano, and the list goes on and on. There are hundreds of thousands of cryptocurrencies, but those are some of the more popular ones, right? And so that's basically how it works. And what is fascinating about NFT art is that it is mostly purchased and acquired in Ethereum. Why is that? Because most NFTs operate on the Ethereum blockchain. So when you acquire an NFT, or I buy an NFT, I pay for it in cryptocurrency, which means I pay for it in Ethereum. Ethereum is a cryptocurrency. So the reason you pay for it is because it operates on the Ethereum blockchain, right? And so what's cool about an NFT is that from an investment perspective, because NFTs are assets, right? They gain value theoretically, not always, but for the most part, they gain value over time, which is good for compound capital gains. Because let's say, for example, in April, I buy an NFT for one Ethereum, which by today's standards is about $3,100 US for one Ethereum. So let's say in January, I pay one Ethereum for a piece of art. And then let's just say come March, that piece of art has increased in value and is now worth 3 Ethereum. Wow. So the art has gained value in Ethereum, but Ethereum is also gaining value as it relates to the US dollar.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Right? And so if you follow that, it's basically compound capital gains. If you're acquiring and working and owning the right NFTs that can follow that model. Now, let me say this, even myself, I've bought into some bad NFTs. I bought into some NFTs that are worthless, and I kick myself in the butt. So not all NFTs are going to do that. But a great example is like the Bored Ape Yacht Club. That's an incredible NFT that has an incredible amount of velocity and a huge community. I bought a Bored Ape I came in late to the game. I bought my first Bored Ape for 4.5 Ethereum, which at the time was almost $10,000. But now the floor for any Bored Ape is 15 Ethereum. You cannot buy a Bored Ape for less than 48 grand as of today.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So there's a lot of potential for people to not only enjoy collecting art and experience art, but to really build solid base net worth, not just in first world countries, in any country that has access to the internet.
Yeah.
You can't stop the internet, right? You can't turn it off. So you can't stop the blockchain. You can't turn the blockchain off.
Yeah.
So the fact that NFTs, not just cryptocurrencies, are a financial revolution for the world, NFTs as art and as an asset class is also helping people, even in the most impoverished countries, build wealth and sustainable wealth and long-term wealth and residual income if you are an artist. Another important thing to talk about NFTs is the royalty base that is cooked into the smart contract. So the smart contract is basically metadata, right? That says these are the rules and the parameters of this particular NFT. So I create an NFT. In that, the smart contract says that me as the creator, I will always receive 10% on any secondary sales in perpetuity for as long as this token exists, which is boom, mind-blowing. Because never in the history of mankind have artists ever had access to secondary sales.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if you look at the Mona Lisa, like I said earlier, that's a primary sale. Whoever sells that painting sells it to this person, and the artist reaps the benefits of that primary sale. When that painting gets sold again, the artist isn't getting.
The artist doesn't, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Right. But the blockchain does that for artists, and so there's also conversations about where do the assets go when I pass on? Can I put together? Can I have a beneficiary for my NFTs when I leave this world? Right? I would think so.
Yeah, because the IP rights don't change. Intellectual property rights don't necessarily change just because you're putting it on the blockchain, right? Because you still have that intellectual property you're creating and putting that on the blockchain as well. So you are able to assign it and pass it on or license it.
Well, correct. And I guess
the underlying artwork, the underlying artwork,
Yeah, and we can get into an IP conversation. I think might be a little heady for the.
No, I will. Yeah, we're not going to get too much into that. Right. But
the finishing thought on that is that, like, look, so I own a Bored Ape today. Let's say, for example, when I'm 60, I still own that Bored Ape. That Bored Ape, if it continues on the trajectory that it's going, that Bored Ape could be worth 7 figures someday. Wow! And I can put in my will that I'll pass that NFT onto my nephew. Why not? I can have a beneficiary for my stock portfolio. Why can't I have a beneficiary for my NFT portfolio? So it's something to really think about. That
very
it's not
interesting. Very interesting issues about that assignment of the IP down the line that come out of that discussion. But what I want to do is go to the specific projects that you have had specific to NFTs, the Minstrel Show, the social justice around that, and the minting process for you. So walk us through why you even decided to create that particular artwork. I know you also created something for the George Floyd Foundation, I believe, and you've had interest and also successfully sold that as well, or minted that as well. But just walk us through the artwork itself, the rationale and story behind it, and educate us on that Minstrel Show, because I think the entire African continent and a lot of stakeholders that are part of the African music law community probably will be hearing this for the first time and say, whoa, what is this about, especially on the continent? So enlighten us about that, and then walk us through how you minted your own NFT and sort of what the future holds for some of your projects.
Oh, thank you for asking. I came into the NFT space, and I mentioned Spinema earlier.
Yes.
I came into the NFT space having minted the world's first award-winning spoken word film as an NFT. So the first NFT that I created was a project called I Can't Breathe, which is a poetic soliloquy of my pain during the civil rights movement, the world's largest civil rights movement post the death of Mr. George Floyd. That film got a lot of critical acclaim, went on to broadcast on KTLA here in Los Angeles, et cetera, et cetera. And so I minted that as an NFT. It ended up successfully auctioning to one of the largest NFT collectors in the ecosystem, an organization called Metapurse. And they are widely known for acquiring the $69 million Beeple acquisition at Christie's. In an unprecedented move, I decided to donate 100% of those proceeds to the George Floyd Memorial Foundation. to support the George Floyd Memorial Foundation, but also to work to introduce blockchain technology into the inner cities of Minneapolis. Because I often find, and especially as it relates to the Afrodiaspora, is that minorities, not just people of color, but women as well, in many cases are oftentimes the last people to the table as it relates to technological innovation and financial innovation.
Sure.
And so for me, it was very important to be able to not just give money to the George Floyd Memorial Foundation. It was very important that they received it as crypto, so that they would then have a digital wallet and a digital ledger, and then they could start educating other people in their inner city communities about the benefits and the values of cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. That went on to get a lot of acclaim, and Forbes wrote about my work. I minted a second project, which is another Spinema piece with Grammy winning poet Mr. Malcolm Jamal Warner, who was an iconic actor. That also successfully auctioned off, and I donated from that project almost $7,000 to an organization called the New Earth Foundation. So I say this because I want everyone to understand that the social impact work that I create is not only about raising the conversation and raising awareness about, deep-seated social issues. It's also about the philanthropic side of using NFTs for the betterment of humankind, because we can take the equity that we earn from some of these proceeds, that we can give it to people that are boots on the ground, that are actually making the world a better place and creating opportunities for unheard voices. And so that's my mission statement. I say that because it's a good segue into why I'm doing what I'm doing today, which is the current NFT series called the Modern Day-Minstrel.
Yeah.
And the Modern Day-Minstrel,
amazing work.
Thank you. It's a portrait series of myself, a man of Afro descent, painted in blackface. And each image uses stereotypes against myself in an oxymoronic fashion. So ideas like the watermelon being painted in blackface, white subservient gloves, all of these things that I use in these portraits to tell the story of the minstrel show. So what is the minstrel show? Many people don't realize that the minstrel show was the largest theater movement in U.S. history. In other words, let me say that again. For over 150 years, the national art form were white people painted in blackface, creating theatrical productions that viciously degraded Black people and made people of Afro descent seem like sexual deviants, tomfoolish, predatory, and dumb and ill and dumb-witted. These shows were so big and so popular, they overtook opera and ultimately became vaudeville, then Broadway, eventually silent films, eventually talking films. And if you look all the way up into the 60s, you have iconic people, you have iconic actors that were painted in blackface, including Judy Garland and Fred Astaire. So even to this day, the grandfathering that the minstrel show has created in media globally as we know it, we can trace back to the minstrel show. Because in the early 1900s, when Hollywood was exploding and they were basically deriving their films from the minstrel shows, they created for the world the idea of what the star was supposed to look like, which is white-skinned and Eurocentric.
Yeah.
So even to this day, the Screen Actors Guild is 13% African-American, 4% Latino, 4% Pacific Islander or other, and 74% Caucasian. So this is very important to me as an actor, because I began to understand why I wasn't receiving opportunities as a person of color in Hollywood. And the funny thing is, even though I went to Arizona State University and I took African American studies, and even in high schools, I never learned about the minstrel show.
That's what fascinates me about, sorry to interrupt you there. That's what fascinates me about that, because I've heard of it before, but usually in passing during Black History Month, you see those, movies that sort of tell you the plight, unfortunately, of Black people in America. And then that's where it stops. The fact that you're sharing, and that captivated me so much, actually moved me so much, because the fact that you're saying it has such wide implication globally. And then I looked back, looking at your work, I look back and I think of just even how much on the African continent, the average African artist now tries to emulate what you are saying, actually is the genesis is this horrible background, this horrible history. And and part of the imagery you provide is, nudity, for example, and the painting of it and the sexualization of the Black man. And we've seen it everywhere. So sometimes when, for example, the Little Nas X video, there was a recent video he dropped, I'm forgetting the name now. And you see comments of, yeah, go, you're liberal, you're doing this, be free, be yourself. And then I listen to you saying, wait a minute, no, actually, here's a history of that kind of sexualization. I'm like blown away because globally, that when I travel now, I'm seeing a lot of that type of emulation, particularly with the global Black community. So it was important for me to have you on the show to shed light and talk a little bit more, because I've never seen it interpreted or discussed in that fashion before. So that's fascinating to me.
Well, thank you. And I mean, for me, the most important thing, and as it relates to the nudity in the series, is that the nudity for me harkens back to how Africans were treated when they came in and were sold as slaves. For the most part, they were put on the slave block, mostly nude. Sure. Because the strong Afro physique was part of the intrinsic value of the human trade. The stronger the slave, the more value the slave had. And so the nudity in the minstrel show harkens back to that, number one. But also what happens to the human being when you're stripped nude is you're stripped of your dignity, right? And so when you look at the minstrel show in this photo series as it's presented, it is a nude Afro man, and the only thing that covers him are the vicious stereotypes that have been generationally burned into him. Watermelon, white subservient gloves, and the black face. And unfortunately, the generational trauma that persists as a result of that. So there's very, very important metaphors that are told within each piece. And, if it's all right with you, I'd love to actually maybe share some of that poetry.
Yes, please. I don't know if you absolutely go ahead.
Yeah, let me, it was sort of an afterthought now, but,
I wanted to, I think I'd even asked prior to, but I wasn't sure if you were.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy
sharing that. Absolutely.
So basically, so everybody understands, every NFT has poetry beneath it. And it's my live spoken word poetry that basically uncovers the story of the minstrel as the minstrel is in that particular time in his life. And so I can just pull up one of these really quick. And
absolutely. And let me give you that full screen so that way you can, they can really see the work.
Sure. Let's try this.
And while you're trying to get it, let me just say, if you're joining us, just join us. Thank you for joining us. My guest is David Bianchi, a prolific filmmaker, poet, actor with over 100 credits to his name. And he is talking to us today about his project, The Minstrel Show, as well as NFTs, and how he minted that project as well. He's very involved in the blockchain and just cryptocurrency and that whole space, and NFTs as well, and is a recognized name doing so many amazing things. So as we continue the discussion, have you been able to pull that information up? Okay, great.
Yeah. Okay. So the first NFT in this project, this one was called Equality. Since 1820, white men painted themselves in blackface, making a mockery of the Black story. Starting the Minstrel Show Glory, the largest theater movement in American his story. Does this lynching rope make you uneasy? The white servant gloves that my massa gave me, the big red lips that your granddaddy painted on me. See, my skin is bare with the oppression is my identity. So I have no choice but to work for equality. Welcome to the Minstrel Show.
Wow, that is amazing. That is amazing. And you guys, when you see the actual visuals, powerful. The visuals are just through the roof. So talk to us about minting that and the fact that you've got a lot of support and interest and was successful in the sale essentially, and then you did something different with the copyright, and So just explain to our audience a little bit more about that.
Sure. So minting the NFT, so they're currently minted on a platform called Super Rare. Super Rare is arguably one of the more elite platforms in the NFT space. It's a curated platform, and I'm very grateful for Super Rare for being brave enough to take on this kind of subject matter.
Exactly.
It has been a very successful drop. And what I mean by drop is basically rollout. That's an NFT term for a rollout. It's been a very successful rollout, and some of the most important collectors in the NFT ecosystem have acquired these pieces at a very solid dollar value. The average is 3.5 Ethereum, which by today's standards is almost $12,000 for each of these NFTs. And I'm donating a portion of the proceeds to further Black voices in film and television off the back of the success of this. I will say it has been and is a successful series, but there's also been a lot of negative pushback from so many people in the Black community.
Really?
But there's also been a lot of positive enforcement from a lot of people in the Black community. So it's very
the basis for the pushback. What are people arguing?
Well, a lot of people are arguing that it's trauma porn and that I'm embellishing on Afro struggle and that I'm embellishing on Afro trauma. But it is interesting because then I say to them, well, okay, if that's your position, should our Jewish brothers and sisters stop making Holocaust films? Should we as Afro people stop making films like 12 Years a Slave? Should we not be making films about the Underground Railroad? Should we not be making, incredible movies about the Afro struggle? Because we need to make that content so we can come to terms with our dark history to have a better awareness of who we are today. Because the reality is that even someone as sophisticated as yourself did not understand the breadth.
Not at all. And that's why I was actually going to jump in and say, not only the breadth, it then ties into a clearer understanding of when we follow the money in the entertainment industry, why that somehow never seems to get to the creators of the work. Right. So from the deal making side to so much more involved. I mean, we could just talk about that for aeons, but it connects and makes sense to me now because, I mean, again, I knew about it, but I didn't understand the depth and breadth. It's mind blowing to me that is so interwoven and connected to the industry as we know it today. And then it completely makes sense on all aspects of that lack of diversity, that lack of a lot of creators dying broke half the time because they're not able to truly negotiate what they're worth, but they're creating a multi-billion-dollar industry that other companies or mainstream companies or leaving intergenerational wealth for their families. So for me, it absolutely connects the dot, makes sense. And you really appreciate the gravity of what we're dealing with, at least for me. So it's enlightening. I want to hear things like that. But at the same time, I have heard the arguments over and over again, just in general. Black History Month, you see the same set of stories and people just get tired. Can we get something else on TV? Which goes back to your point on that lack of diversity, right? Now we understand why. But can we get more? Can we get more than just the same old, reruns of the same old stories? And yet those stories are super important. But now we understand why we keep getting maybe only that during Black History Month, and then that's about the extent of it.
But even with Black History Month, it's like, so my work is historical. Believe it or not, I mean, dark historical work. And so even in Black History Month, we uncover a lot of these dark ills and the dark vicious nature of Afro history in colonialist first world countries. And so I think it's really important that we uncover some of this stuff because this is only one piece of institutionalized systematic racism that is still to this day working against people of color. I call this series the Modern Day-Minstrel because there are a lot of folks of Afro descent in entertainment today that either are or feel forced to play the modern day minstrel and are perpetuating stereotypes in rap music and perpetuating stereotypes in dance music to be able to sell records. That I don't want to get too deep
But the
into that.
argument is always, well, there's no other means of making a livelihood and following our passion if we don't do that. And then that creates a whole different discussion
because
that we have,
I feel that we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the fact that what music sells, Black music as it relates to criminality, as it relates to over-sexualization, as it relates to drug use, alcohol abuse, guns, trafficking, cocaine smuggling, like these are the hip hop records that go platinum.
Absolutely.
So
don't get me started.
We have to ask ourselves, are we part of the problem or a part of the solution? And so the work that I create is very white glove in its approach. And is designed for a very sort of highbrow artistic consumption. And it's not for everyone. And I believe that no great artist is without controversy. And, for me, this is only the beginning of my exploration in crypto art. And I believe that there is a big, big, big future yet to come, not just for this series, but for socially conscious NFTs in general. There isn't anyone in the NFT space that's doing the kind of work that I'm doing to the degree that I'm doing it. Much of the NFT art that you see is beautiful, but a lot of it is, Bitcoins and lollipops. A lot of it is hyper realistic, 3D, 4D render stuff, which has a place. And so I'm sort of carving a canal in the NFT space as a sophisticated, socially conscious artist. So I'm really excited about it all. And the IP thing that you mentioned is that anyone who acquires the NFT, I also transfer the intellectual property rights of the poetry to the owner of the NFT as well. That's amazing. another layer.
Why did you decide to do that?
Well, I think it's important that I offer the NFT more utility than just a digital token. I wanted to give any collector not just my art, but a piece of my heart. I believe that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, this work will be very, very highly celebrated in the digital art space. And anyone who owns intellectual property rights to this poetry will have a lot of intrinsic value in their purse. Because I know there's no stopping me, and I'm going to continue to go vertical. So I think it's just a unique way to add value to a non-fungible token. Some artists are actually giving physical aspects of it. So you buy an NFT and then maybe you get the physical painting as well. With this, I'm also offering a luxury 24-page full color book that is the entire Minstrel Show, the history of the Minstrel Show, that will be personally signed by myself for the owner of the NFT as well. So there's a lot of utility that I'm offering the NFT more and above and beyond just the digital art.
Yeah. So we really spent a lot of time in the art and film space. I know you just have a little background with the music side of things. And since this is also the African Music Law Show, even though we focus on music business and entertainment law related matters, can you sort of bring it home as we get ready to wrap it up on music for our artists that are watching this, how this plays out and the value? You've explained it so well, but just maybe in their language, using music, how it's beneficial for them to get into the space. And just before you do, on the African side of things, there is an artist, I think a painter, painter, if memory serves me right, who has been one of the few success stories on NFTs, with his work selling for as much as $75,000 in the NFT space. And then there's an actual musician, hip hop artist, who's trying to get into already in the space. And I'm not sure if he's like the value of how much is minted with his NFTs concerning his music. But can you sort of relate it to the music space, if you will, on the value and why artists, musicians should get into it?
Yeah, I think that NFTs are fundamentally going to change everything that we know about music, film, art, and intellectual property. And just so you know, an NFT is basically data that is unbreakable on the ledger. So it can apply to any discipline, the medical field, it could apply to driving records, it could apply to
publishing, what we're doing here.
Publishing, it could apply to any sort of way to streamline historical data related to something, right? But as it relates to music, I mean, even Quincy Jones is launching a new platform called One Of, that is going to be completely music driven. It's not going to be about art. It's all music. It's going to be NFTs for dummies. And they're launching like never before heard Whitney Houston tracks and TLC and
Wow.
Doja Cat and John Legend. And so that's coming very, very soon. The musical revolution through NFTs is already here. So I invite anybody who's a musician to really step into this space and really figure out where you fit in. Like, go into Clubhouse rooms, ask questions, go on YouTube, search what is an NFT, watch 10 different videos, and really start to figure out how you can fit into the space. Because that's how I entered it. I didn't know jack shit. I owned some cryptocurrency, but I went on YouTube and I just did a bunch of searching and a bunch of reading, and I kind of figured it out. So that's why I really invite people to do, because I think that there's a lot of space for musicians to make real long-term passive income in the blockchain through NFTs. There are incredible electronic dance musicians that are already and have already done it. Blau has made millions in NFT sales, for example. So I think that there's a great opportunity here for musicians to get involved. Just do searches for music and NFTs. Osinachi is an incredible African artist, and
Exactly.
and
that's who I was referring to.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Osinachi is he's considered a crypto art OG, but he's got an incredible story. Like, he didn't have the software back in the day. He was actually making crypto art with Microsoft Word. That's how he was making his art, because he just so it's almost like what do they say, that scarcity breeds creation.
Absolutely.
And so that's what Osinachi was able to do. And Osinachi's an incredible guy. Him and I communicate back and forth every once in so often. And I'm hugely inspired by his story and inspired by his work. He is the leader of African crypto art coming out of the actual continent.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think my invitation is just to dive in, start looking around, and things aren't going to happen overnight. But if you stay in and you really find a niche for yourself, the NFT community is wide open and it's incredibly welcoming. Everybody is here and available to answer questions, to be a part of your creativity, to help you learn, to help you grow. So be an early adopter, because 3 or 4 years from now, you will not regret it.
Awesome. So let's close it out, David, with any final words of advice you have, sort of stepping back from the whole NFT discussion we've had and going back to just life principles and philosophies and lessons that you've shared already overall. Any parting words you have for our audience, creatives, professionals, executives, all kinds of people watching that are like, you know what, I want to get to where David is. I want that tenacity, that determination, that stay with it till you get it done. I want that for myself. So what's that parting words or those parting words you have to share with
Sure. Thank you for asking that question. One of the things that comes to mind is, I say this often, it's a quote that I wrote, in that the distance between greatness and mediocrity is your perception. The distance between greatness and mediocrity is your perception. How do you see yourself? How do you see your work? How do you see what you can bring to the world to uplift this world, to make it a better place? What can you contribute to the artistic human community? Because you can come from a place of scarcity or a place of abundance. Either way, you are correct. But it's going to be up to you to wake up every day and put in that contact lens that speaks through abundance. Because if you don't see it and you don't know it, how is anybody else going to see it or know it? I often use the metaphor with the grocery store clerk. If a grocery store clerk who's checking out the food, beep, 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 wants to be a general manager someday, if he has those aspirations, he needs to check out that food with the focus and determination and punctuality of a general manager, because he or she knows he or she is a general manager, even though his current state in the chain says he's a clerk. Because if you walk and carry yourself like a general manager does, eventually everybody else will see and they will understand why you are supposed to assume that role, because you behaved as such before they knew it. See, the store clerk saw greatness in himself, and as a result of that was able to rise to the occasion to become a general manager, right? And so I invite everybody to do that really look at the greatness that you can birth into this world. and know that what you have is great and that it's not mediocre.
Mm-hmm.
And not to fall to mediocrity. And if there are people surrounding you, and I don't know who I'm talking to, but if there are people surrounding you that have a mediocre perspective, that are throwing water on your flames, I suggest you close the door. Just like I did, in my late teens, and I abandoned New York. I knew I had to close the door on the mediocre thinking and the mediocre situations that I was finding myself in. And I continue to think about that one day at a time. Who am I surrounding myself with? What am I doing? Where am I going? Why am I going? What is my reasoning? And focus on being abundant and being great to the best of your ability one day at a time.
Mic drop, clapping. Bravo, bravo, bravo. Thank you so much. It has just been amazing to have you. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the knowledge. Thank you for your creativity and everything you're putting out there, because what I notice is it's really coming from a profound, deep place of love. And when you put love out there like that, it can only be all things wonderful coming right back at you. So thank you again for gracing us with your presence and so much that you've shared. Please wait in the waiting room for me. Let me just close it out with my audience and I will join you momentarily. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Wow, everyone. I'm still digesting and unpacking a lot of that. Thank you so much for watching, or if you're listening on the podcast, thank you for listening. I will catch you all next week right here on the Africa Music Law Show. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great rest of the weekend and week coming up. And let's close it out. I want to do things differently this time around and close it out with our theme music. All right.